Now, I will talk about the definition of travel cost method. Travel cost method is method used to calculate economic values of environmental goods or sites associated with recreation. There are several variations of travel cost method. The first one is zonal approach, second one is individual approach, and the last one is random utility approach.
The travel cost method closely mimics the more conventional empirical techniques used by economists to estimate economic values based on market prices. The method is based on actual behavior, on what people actually do, rather than stated willingness to pay, and also what people say they would do in a hypothetical situation. The method is relatively inexpensive to apply, and on-site surveys provide opportunities for large sample sizes, as visitors tend to be interested in participating. The results are relatively easy to interpret and explain.
Thank you. So now I will talk about the limitation on travel cost method. So there are few limitations in travel cost method, and one of it is the travel cost method assume that people perceive and respond to the change in travel cost the same way that they would respond to the change in admission price. Other than that, by defining and measuring the opportunity cost of time or the value of time spent traveling can be problematic. Because the time spent traveling could have been used in the other ways, it has an opportunity cost. Next is the availability of substitute sites will affect values. For example, if two people travel the same distance, they are assumed to have the same value. Measuring recreational quality and relating recreational quality to environmental quality can be difficult. And last but not least, the travel cost method is limited in its scope of application because it requires user participation and cannot be used to assign values to on-site environment features and functions that users of the sites do not find valuable.
Now I will talk about zonal approach. The method used in zonal approach is to calculate the recreational zone as a whole, as a single entity. The zonal approach has the advantages of being the simplest and easiest approach out of all three approaches. However, it also has some disadvantages. Zonal approach cannot be used to calculate the changes happening in the recreational site. It also cannot consider some factors that are important to determine the value of the recreational site.
Thank you. So now I will talk about the next variation, which is individual approach. The individual travel cost approach is similar to the zonal approach, but use survey data from individual visitors and statistical analysis rather than data from each zone. This method thus requires more data collection and slightly more complicated analysis, but will give more precise results. Rather than simply collecting information on number of visitors and their distances, the researchers would conduct a survey of visitors. Using the survey data, the researcher can proceed in a similar way to the zonal model by estimating, using regression analysis, the relationship between numbers of visits and travel costs and other relevant variables. This time, the researcher would use individual data rather than data from each zone. The regression equation gives us the demand function for the average visitors to the sites, and the area below this demand curve gives the average consumer surplus. This is multiplied by the total relevant population, which is the population in the region where visitors come from, to estimate the total consumer surplus for the sites. Because additional data about visitors, substitute sites, and quality of the sites has been collected, the value estimates can be fine-tuned by adding these other factors to the statistical model. Including information about the quality of the sites allow the researcher to estimate the change in the value of the site if its quality change. To do so, Two different demand curves would estimate which is one for each level of quality. The area between these two curves is the estimate of the change in consumer surplus when the quality change. Next, we move to the survey. So the survey might ask for some questions such as following, which is the location of the visitor's home, how many times they visit the sites in a past year or season, the length of the trip, the amount of time spent at the sites, the travel expenses, the person's income or other information on the value of the town, and other socio-economic characteristics of the visitors, and also other related questions such as below.
A distinct drawback of the models presented so far is that most interesting policy questions relate not to the total consumer surplus derived from access to the recreational area, but to the change in consumer surplus that results from a change in the environmental quality at the site. The random utility approach is the most complicated and expensive of the travel cost approaches. It is also the state-of-the-art approach because it allows for much more flexibility in calculating benefits. It is the best approach to use to estimate benefits for specific characteristics or quality changes of sites rather than for the site as a whole. It is also the most appropriate approach when there are many substitute sites. The random utility approach assumes that individuals will pick the site that they prefer out of all possible similar sites. Individuals make trade-offs between site quality and the price of travel to the site. Hence, this model requires information on all possible sites that a visitor might select, their quality characteristics and travel cost to each site.